ordinary business? Not that I know. Declarations of interest? None. The minutes from the Audit and Risk Committee, the 22nd of June 22. John, sorry.
I was just moving.
Thank you, Mr. Seconder. Caroline, thank you. Everyone in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Annual reports 2021 and 22. Erin.
The purpose of this report is for Council to receive the project plan for the annual report 21-22, and the recommendation is that the committee receives the project plan.
You're basically 2 weeks in already, aren't you?
At least.
Yeah, at least. Okay, we've got the recommendation there on page 4. We've got a mover and a seconder that the Audit and Risk Committee receives the annual report project plan for 21-22. We've got Caroline and we've got Liz. Everyone in favour, please.
It was actually Neil.
Oh, sorry. It's going to be a good afternoon, isn't it? And Neil. So Caroline and Neil, everyone in favour, please say aye.
Can I speak?
Oh, sorry, yes you can.
Yeah.
Sorry, Neil.
The timetable's all good and well. Who is responsible for ensuring that all those deadlines are met and we meet our requirements? We generally do get there by the time we get there. I see it's the 12th of December. Why is it not the 31st of October as it used to be?
So I'll take that part of the question if you like.
Okay.
Yep, so through the chair, so last year the annual reports were given an extension due to COVID, and that's because of Audit New Zealand have a lot of pressure on their resource in terms of actually being able to achieve the audits within the time frame. So last year an exemption was given till the 31st of December, and that has been rolled over to this year. We would love to have it done by the 31st of October, and that's what we're working to as a team. However, we're at the mercy of Audit New Zealand's timeframes. But Erin can answer the first part of your question.
We're also having to work with the timeframes for the audit of ACL. So they're not starting at ACL until the 19th of September. So normally that would be started about a month earlier, and we would have their reports to bring in to the consolidation, but we won't have that information probably till about the 31st of October at the earliest.
So the delay is basically because of Audit New Zealand's timetable?
They've had to factor in their resources to the timeframes.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Erin. So we've got a mover and a seconder. Everyone in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. The next one, pecuniary interest register.
Tanya at home.
Tanya is home. Tanya is there. How are you, Tanya? Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. You want to speak to it first, or you want to wait for questions?
Nothing too much to say through the chair. It's really, this is just an update for members, and just so we can start getting the process underway internally to have systems in place for when this comes into force later in the year.
Okay, thank you for that. We've got some questions. Stuart?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. What's the difference to the new one to the one we've already filled in each year?
I can't answer. I'm not sure the difference because I'm not sure what you fill in now. I think it's for annual reporting requirements. Tony might be able to correct me, but this is.
No, I thought we filled in one with our pecuniary interests that we had.
Through the chair, there's a related parties questionnaire that we all fill in, which is different. And also at the start of a term, there is a request. I don't believe it's compulsory, that elected members can declare their wider world of influence or transactions with.
Yeah, that's correct. This is bringing in mandatory requirements nationwide, because I think council by council it's quite different how it's approached. And the big change here being that it will be an offence if members fail to lodge that their pecuniary interest return each year.
Okay, thank you for that, Neil.
This is not the register, or is it the one that sits in the Chief Executive's office, which we can update occasionally if we need to? Is that the one? Is this the one?
So this is an entirely new legislative requirement that's coming in. So yes, we have a register now, as do most councils, but the purpose of this legislation is to be accountable and transparent and just have consistency in terms of what you have to declare, because there's no consistency at the moment prior to this legislation between councils.
So is this one replacing the one we have? Is that correct?
I imagine in practice, yes, it will replace the physical register that the Chief Executive has, but purely because this is a new legislative requirement that councils must follow. So it's very prescriptive in terms of what you must declare.
Okay, thank you for that. Liz, you've got a question?
I have. So in the past, when we've filled out the register, it's been what groups we're in, what committees we're on, etc., etc. This time, we actually have to add how much we're earning in wage and salaries, directors' fees, everything. That seems. Is that correct?
No. So the bill as introduced did require the monetary figures such as salaries you earned in unrelated jobs to be disclosed, but that's changed through the select committee process. So now all you have to declare is if you are employed through outside of council and who your employer is and a description of that business. So not the actual figure. Same with directors' fees. So that was wrong. There was a lot of. Yeah, there's a lot of pushback through the select committee process, understandably.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that, Lynette. You've got a question?
Yes, I'm just going to ask all those that have stood for council going forward in this election, have they been alerted, that there's all these forms in that to fill out on all these details?
My understanding was there was a couple of slides in the candidates' information session on this Amendment Act. So if I guess if candidates went to that, I couldn't speak as to what's in the information pack.
Because it's quite broad here, a lot of stuff they need to know, and I was just wondering.
Yeah, thank you for that. Murray, you've got anything to add to this or not? Okay, that's fine. Yeah. Neil?
I'm just, when it is filled out, who gets access to this form? Who can see it?
So the legislation requires council to publish a summary of the register on the council's website, and so not the full register, and it really is at the discretion of the registrar as to what that summary will contain. The devil in the detail being that obviously council is subject to the Local Government Official Information Act, so we could be subject to official information requests for the entire register, and it will have to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis as to whether we would have to release that information. So there is guidance coming out from external law firms on Simpson Grierson on the register and how councils are meant to comply. So hopefully there'll be a bit more detail in that for consistency, obviously.
Thanks. I go to John. You've got a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I find particularly clause 14 on page 10, I find a lot of this information is actually verging on invasion of personal rights, particularly the name of any company which the member is a director or holds or controls more than 10%, and the description of the main business activities of that company, the name of any trust in which the member has a beneficial interest. To me, that's verging on bloody personal and private rights and should not be part of any register of any bloody thing.
Thank you, John. Stuart? Sorry, same question. Tanya, you want to reply?
The only comment I'd make is that this is modelled on what MPs do in Parliament, so it's a very similar process. And I appreciate there's a very big difference between local government and central government, but that's the basis of where this legislation's come from.
Okay. Neil?
And it's compulsory to fill it out for elected members?
That's correct, yes. It's an offence to fail to fill it out.
Okay. John?
And just to point out, if you don't fill it in or don't fill it in correctly, for each offence, it's a fine of $5,000. So, I mean, I would not be standing for council again if I had to bloody fill this shit in.
Okay, thank you for that. Stuart?
Your 14H, you've got to describe all your property. Gosh, they sure are going for the doctor, aren't they?
That's correct. And another change to the select committee process is it's not your address anymore. So the bill as produced was, it got down to the, having to supply your address, but luckily now it's just your locality. So say your suburb of where you own a house. Which...
Okay. So when is this coming in? Because there seems to be quite a bit of questions here around the table with people not being happy. So is this going to be changed? Can we ask for some more information, or is it just going to happen?
So the legislation comes into force, so it's already passed through Parliament. It comes into force in November, and the first return will be due sometime mid-February.
Next year?
2023, okay. Yeah.
Okay. Councillors, any more comments or questions? If not, we've got a recommendation on page, what are we, 8, that the Audit and Risk Committee receives this report, and that Audit and Risk Committee recommends to Council that Council appoints the governance team leader as the registrar in accordance with section 54G of the Local Government Act. Do we've got a mover?
I'll move it because we're just receiving it and we're just appointing
That's what
the
it is.
governance team leader.
So let's move that. Is the seconder? None. I will. Yeah. You won't second it? Not. Okay. I will second it. So everyone in favour, please say aye. Okay, sorry, discussion.
I forgot what the question was. The yeah, I know what it is. If we don't pass this recommendation here today, what are the consequences?
Tanya,
you're brave enough to ask that. Answer that.
So the purpose, so it's in legislation now, so it's a requirement. So that there's no ability to change the legislation as it is. The purpose of my recommendation is purely for council to delegate the responsibility for the registrar to the governance team leader, because council must have a registrar under the legislation. If that recommendation isn't passed, then by default it will have to be the chief executive, would be my assumption. But in terms of changing the legislation, that there's no ability to at this stage, or it'll be up to the individual members as to whether they choose to lodge a return. But obviously, that those offence provisions are there in the legislation. So,
okay, Carolyn.
Was this piece of legislation consulted on with local government?
It was, as some of you may recall, council did have input into a submission that was compiled by Taiuara, which is the local government professionals. There was possibly late last year. So all councillors would have seen that email at the time that went around.
Thank you for that, Tanya. Any more questions, councillors? If not, we've got a mover and a seconder. If you're in favour, please say aye. There will be 2, 3, 4. Thank you. Passed. The next one is playgrounds, compliances and safety audit. Good afternoon, Ian.
Good afternoon, Mr Chairman, councillors.
Yeah. You want to speak to it first? You want to?
Yes, I will. Thank you very much. The report before you today is the next iteration from the most current playground audit that we've had undertaken by an independent specialist, the same one that's done the first report. So this report is a snapshot some 15, 18 months down the track from the first audit, and it clarifies in the report obviously the past situation, where we're currently sitting, and then it's got some recommendations and some summary of just where we're at and what we need to do. I will point out that we haven't changed from our compliance percentage, which was 57%, is still 57%. That doesn't mean to say that we've been doing nothing. We've got a new playground that's been assessed within this report, and that is out at Rukaya. And it's actually in a rather sad state of play in terms of compliance, so that has dragged the overall score down. We've also got another playground that wasn't assessed in the first round up at Lake Camp, and again, when the assessor was here, the weather was rather inclement, snow on the road, and they could not get up, so next year that will get assessed as well. So there's still a couple of those, shall we say, curly customers to deal with through the process. So what it does clarify is that we're certainly making progress on an annual basis from where we started, and we need to continue to do that. So the information contained within this report will be the information that I use as the justification and the basis of truth for the asset management plan that we're about to embark upon building for your next long-term plan 24-34. So this will help inform what those conversations are. It will also help inform what the fiscal requirements are to address the shortcomings. So you'll see in the report it clarifies the amount of items that have been either an excellent or very poor or anywhere in between condition. It also gives a priority rating for the capital renewals, where we've got equipment that's simply, we've had our lifespan's worth out of it, and it's time for it to be replaced. So that information will filter through into the next LTP. Having said that, we've still got monies and allocations flagged in the current long-term plan, and where some of the work that we're doing, even as of today, we spoke about this morning in the briefings about the soft fall surfacing getting upgraded. Some of that is from the past season's iteration of funding, some is from the new. So that's a continuation and will be ongoing. The other planned activities and actions going forward are that we've clearly got a suite of playgrounds that reside on domain board administered properties, and they pose risk to the council as the ultimate land administrator. So that'll be another aspect in this coming long-term plan process that I will be looking to you for jurisdiction to actually deal with, manage and completely oversee playgrounds on the domain board lands throughout the district. And that is because the risk factor, should there be an incident, an event, that would come back to the council as the land owner, the land administrator. So the council would be seen as the PCBU, and anything untoward would come back and rest at the council's feet. So we need to suitably manage that, manage the risk that's posed there, and hence part of me informing you of that through this process today.
This audit is every year, or is it every second year?
Through the chair, we've from the when new general manager Mr. Stephen Fabish came on board, he instigated 3 annual yearly assessments. This is the result of year 2. Yep. We've got 1 more to go in that cycle of 3. My plan going forward would then be that we do another assessment in every year 2 of the LTP cycle, so that for every asset management plan prior to an LTP, we've got a new current snapshot of where we currently sit and what our requirement should be. So that will inform that process.
Thank you, Ian. We've got some questions. Carolyn?
Thanks, Ian. Point 9 on page 10, renewal, repairs and maintenance. The total value of our playground asset is 4 million, is that right? $4,001,800?
That would be
That's correct, well, that's what it says.
correct, yes.
So you've got 9 items that have a maintenance, so that's items like one swing here and a slide here and something that need to be repaired for $1,400, is that correct? And then we've got 9 areas that have a capital renewal priority 1, presumably because they're dangerous or rusty or loose, of $194,000.
That's correct.
So why are we separating the items versus the renewal priority 1s?
Through the chair, we separate that out because the first and foremost, the risk is assessed, and that is it easily fixable, or is it a maintenance repair item that we should be addressing or could have addressed? So that's the items that come under the condition assessment criteria. The actual capital assessment looks at the overall slide or swing set or modular unit.
So it doesn't look at, like, for example, Lake Camp or the Ashburton Domain or whatever. It looks at the particular individuals in the capital renewal priority. It looks at the actual, not the whole playground, it looks at the item.
Looks at the items, that's correct.
Okay.
But every item across the district, this encapsulates everything that we've looked at, with the one exception being Lake Camp at this point in time.
So yeah, you said that in the report. One additional question, if I may, please, Chair. With regards to doing up and sprucing up our playgrounds, are we getting rid of some of that edging on some of the playgrounds so it's more accessible? And put, like you mentioned this morning about the East Street playgrounds, you're putting that carpet rubbery stuff in. Are we going to do that on some of these playgrounds so that people in wheelchairs or on sticks and stuff can access it?
Yes, through the chair, this is noted in here, this particular assessment. I did request specifically that was an element that was looked at by the auditor, and she has, and given us a steer on the accessibility of all. And we'll ultimately use that as a guide going forward when we do work on any playgrounds to check that that's heading in the right direction. Can I also add, Mr. Chairman, that the other item that we added into the assessment was an overview of the shade element, which has cropped up from time to time. So we got the assessor to look at what we've got in the way of natural shade or artificial. And obviously we've got quite a bit of natural shade on a lot of the play sites, and certainly the advice from the auditor was that that is a good way to go long term. So we will look to do and use and utilise natural shade going forward. Admittedly, it won't happen tomorrow because the tree has to grow, but if we start the ball rolling, acknowledging that we need some form of natural shading, then we do that, as opposed to artificial shading, which it becomes another asset and another replacement item, which comes with a cost tag.
Thank you for that, Ian. Liz?
Thank you. Got a couple of things. First of all, I'm really pleased that you've included the Reserve Board playgrounds and the domains in with this, because in the past they've been up to the domain boards to fix up or repair, and some of them don't have the budget to do that. My question is on page 21. It says PRAMS ratings, and it's got a list from 1 to 29. Is that in order of how good they are? Because it seems like all the Western Wall ones are down the bottom, so I'm just hoping it's location-wise. It's sort of about the second or third page from the end of the report.
Through the chair, I think yes, that's where we stand as our ranking, pretty much within the rest of the country. Is that the?
No, it's got a list of all our playgrounds. The top heading is PRAMS ratings.
21.
Page 21 in the playground report.
It is.
About the last third to last page.
Sorry, my print has not got numbers. Through the chair, yes, I do have that here. So that's
It's not how they're rated.
no,
From
no,
top
no.
to
Through the
nine.
chair, that's not the rating of the playground. That's just an order list.
Yeah, that's good. And then just another quick question, if I can. You mentioned, I think we've probably only got 1 or 2 tractors left in some of the playgrounds. One's up at Chambers Park in Methven, and I think that's mentioned in the report. Can you go out to local service groups and sort of say, or, you know, the Vintage Machinery Club, and see if there's an interest to help sort of spruce it up or make it, because I still think they're important pieces of play equipment.
Through the chair, you're exactly right. They are very important for the local community. It's part and parcel of what people have grown up with and have grown to expect. So we have got one away currently at the engineers to have the once over in terms of the yardstick of measurement of entrapment items and all of those little safety features that the play auditors rule goes over. So how that one comes out, that will be the gauge on how we can go forward with that. But it's certainly my intention to make safe those items that are old implements, primarily tractors, so that we have got an ability to retain those historic elements around the district. So the one in question that I mentioned is the one at Rakaia, so that's gone to the local engineer with some parameter around the hazards on it that need to be identified, addressed and made safe.
Thank you, Liz. John?
Thank you. Couple of questions. Why was the Rakaia Huts playground left out last time?
Through the chair, I think that wasn't as much a focus on domain board areas, and it was obviously one that had simply missed the muster when the list was assessed. I'm not sure that it has always been on the assessment list for even the regular monthly checks, and I suspect that might be why it was missed off. It is also on Hut Holder Association land area, and there is a reserve piece in the middle, but it's a crossover. It crosses over both, so I suspect that was the reason why.
So it is on, we do have a domain down there, do we?
Correct.
But you're saying it's on the hut holder's land?
It's on both.
It's on both. I mean, to me, a solution would be, because obviously it's not going to be used a hell of a lot, unless it's being used over holiday time when the huts are full type of thing, why don't we offer it back to the Hut Holders Association to take care of?
Through the chair, that does become problematic, because with the health and safety lens over it, we can't absolve ourselves the responsibility of a known hazard, particularly if it's on land that has got council administration, even if it's delegated to a reserve board, a domain board, a hut holders association. If they're the actual owner, then it becomes a different story, but if it ultimately can come back to the council, we've got a responsibility and a duty of care to provide.
So just moving along the coast a bit to Hackatree, I think there's a set of swings or something like that down there. Does that come part of it or not?
Through the chair, off the top of my head, I don't believe there was one assessed down there, but if there is one within the bounds of the hut holders camp, then we need a closer look at that.
Yeah, I think it's
in the bottom.
Yeah, on the bottom part, next to that bathing changing shed.
Right.
Yeah. So it's on
Okay.
council land.
It is on council land, you reckon? Okay. Okay. I've got the next one, Diane.
Thank you. A question, Ian, around, as I read this, I mean, it's good reading, but I thought it's all become so professional. The thought that kept going through my mind is, can service clubs have, they've traditionally come in and done an upgrade or helped fix up a playground. So from reading this, I would take it that's no longer possible.
Through the chair, that's quite correct. It's those days are gone where a service club can come in for a working bee on a Saturday morning with a box of nails and a trailer load of timber and knock something up.
So even if
Sadly.
they wanted to, and you're not allowed to have them work under your jurisdiction to do it?
Correct, because it's the work has to be certified and it has to come through with the appropriate approvals and certifications
Thanks.
to
And
meet
I
that meets the New Zealand standards.
Yep, thank you. And a comment I wanted to make, I was pleased to read about the shades because we had the ladies from the Cancer Society in here submitting on us providing more shade, so it's good to see that that's in the plan.
Thank you, Diane. Lynette?
We often get asked at the reserve boards about our playgrounds, and I think they might be pleased if council did take them over, it took that off their hands. Is there going to be a report go to each particular reserve board about their playground, just to notify them, because nothing's really come out for a while, and the question has been asked, especially out at Rakai too, with things going.
Yeah, so through the chair, there would definitely be some communication with all of the domain boards individually and specifically in relation to their assets and to the problems that are contained within. Also conceptually on the fact of us taking over that management thereof and just to get their buy-in to that. So there would be definitely dialogue occurs as part of the formulation of the asset management plan that I would expect in there I will be able to have some phrases around the acceptance or not, or the questions that might come from the respective domain boards, just to have their input.
Yeah, I think they'd be happy because the cost of putting all that chip down and that is quite expensive. They'd be happy to give us to us.
Thank you, Lynette. Neil, you've got a question?
Think about the Rakai huts. Years ago there was nothing there at all, and they asked for playground equipment probably 10 or more years ago, maybe more, because they had very little, and they were going to maintain it and look after it, and the equipment came from playgrounds that the council had where they took stuff away from and sort of recycled, went down there, and I understood it was on their private land, not the council land, that they were putting it on, so hence it was theirs. And if it is on domain board land down there, we don't have a domain board down there. Is that a anomaly, or is that something that slipped through the cracks? Because council doesn't have any governance structure down there as the domain boards do around the rest of the district. So you may want to look at that, whether we do have or we don't, or that it's theirs or not. Just looking at the in the report, you got monies to be spent in this year and next financial year on the capital. Where does the capital monies come from? Is it borrowed or is it reserve contributions?
Through the chair, look, I'm not exactly sure of that off the top of my head. Maybe Steve has got a...
Just through, Mr. Chair, I think it's a combination of depreciation, Aaron, these playgrounds are depreciated. So depreciation and loan funded if it's new playgrounds that are going in or added to.
So it's replacement, so it'll be depreciation, which will be rated for.
Yes.
Would you not use reserve contributions as well?
Yes, reserve contributions as well. Sorry, that's what I was referring to, yeah.
So there'd be no loans taken out on replacing playgrounds?
Through the chair, I wouldn't expect so for these items.
Yeah.
As long as there's funds in the reserves contribution balance for that particular site.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you for that. No more questions? I've got one, and Carolyn mentioned it before. All play areas, do they have to be accessible for everyone, or is there a percentage what has to be accessible to everyone, wheelchair or not?
Through the chair, not for wheelchair. There's nothing in the standard that is prescriptive for less abled people. We talk about the accessibility being to those that may be on a stick or a walking frame, or with elderly family that go with the children and the young people to those sites. So it's not a completely less abled level of service. It's a more one for the general community. So there will by default be an amount within the community that for one reason and another can't physically get into their site, and often that is because of the fact that the area has to have that loose soft fill, and that precludes some just by nature of what it is. But it's a majority type situation as opposed to a minority.
Thank you for that. Councillors, we've got a recommendation on page 15 that the Audit and Risk Committee receives the playgrounds compliance and safety audit report. We've got a mover and a seconder. I've got Liz, John, and Liz is number 2. If you're in favour, please say aye. Carried. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
Councillors, this is the end of the open part of the meeting.